Hello, and thank you for joining us. That's right. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you again today. Every week, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, the public, talking to you about the issues that matter on everything from a local, state, federal, international level. And we thank all of our guests from across the United States and across the world. If this is the first time you've been with the show, we do a long-form political commentary, and we're about to get started here. So, and by the way, the intro music was from a band called Adam Ate the Apple. They're good friends of ours, and we thank them for allowing us to play a little bit of their musical interlude. There's been a lot going on this week, in taxes, COVID life. It's been very taxing for a lot of people, ourselves included. And it's just been one thing after the other. And in fact, one of the things, and I want to get to the breaking news that's just been coming out today. Now, you may have heard the Cuomo must go. There is a rally that's going to be happening on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. This is a direct reaction. And by the way, James Zecca is a friend of ours. He has allowed us to provide his information. This is his email. He's also put it out on Facebook. There is a massive movement of people all across the New York State and beginning to grow across the country, asking for the removal of Andrew Cuomo. Now, many people may think that's because Cuomo is directly responsible for the death of 16,000 people in nursing homes throughout the COVID crisis, something that he wrote a book about with the absence of the fact that he killed 16,000 people, taking advantage and saying that he was a great leader. In fact, he was often quoted as being a Cuomo-sexual. There was a great movement of Democrats behind him until we came to understand that 16,000 people not only were killed, but that the Cuomo administration and Governor Cuomo himself directly lied to the American people in violation of Public Officer Law Section 74-H, and revealing corruption throughout New York State. Now, a lot of people would think, well, this is the reason why people want to see Cuomo removed. That is not the case. In fact, it's now that there have been 7, as of March 13th at 12:03 p.m., it's come out, there are 7 women who have now accused him of sexual assault. The numbers just keep growing. And every time we learn a little bit more about this, we have been finding out that throughout the entire time that Governor Cuomo has been elected in office, talking about almost 10 years now, we are looking at a man who has used his position of power to abuse women. And this is the reason why we have seen the New York State legislature begin to move forward to try and say they need to remove Andrew Cuomo. Honestly, we should have stopped at the fact that 16,000 people died and he lied. There should be no other reason that we need to address this, and no other reason why there is a rally on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. in downtown Utica, amongst other places in America, saying Cuomo must go. The fact that he has 7, and I say it again, 7 sexual assault allegations now placed against him is just an additional reason, just more icing on the cake. The problem isn't just the sexual assaults, it's the death of 16,000 people, or at least that's what we believe. Now, you may disagree, and of course, you are welcome to make a comment. We look forward to your comments on Facebook, Twitter, on YouTube, to reach out to us, and even to call into the program at 607-242-1582, because we want to hear what you have to say. What is the most important thing to you? The most recent allegation, the fact that there have now been 7 different women who have accused Governor Cuomo of sexual assault and sexual misconduct, or the fact that he has a corrupt government that is willing to lie to the American people and to lead to directly to the death of 16,000 people. This is a number that's akin to war crimes, literally. Jesse mentions, and hello, Jesse, it's good to see you here. Give him an Emmy. They already gave him one. Again, this was during the time before we realized the allegations, the corruption that is going on in his government. Well, the most recent charges of corruption in his government, because there was the Moorwind, what was it? Moorwind, I forget. There was an investigation into Governor Cuomo and many of the other leaders of New York that took down Sheldon Silver as one of the people in New York State government that are absolutely corrupt. And it was removed and stopped before it could find direct control with Governor Cuomo. So this is the third round of allegations of corruption within his government. And because of that, whoops, I'm losing one of my cameras here, one of my equipment. And because of this, we've seen that Governor Cuomo is now being sought to be removed, to resign, even though he has absolutely stated he will not resign, he will not give up his position, and therefore he has to be forcibly removed. Again, this is the most recent allegation. So while we go into the show and we talk more about this, we're going to be talking about many things, and obviously this is a conversation with you and us together. We also want to get into, and just like Jesse has done, please do let us know your thoughts as we go forward. But we also wanted to talk a little bit, now we're going to be getting to what's going on with the BLM, with the autonomous zone in Minnesota, the insurrection going on in Minnesota. And we're going to be talking about pregnant women in the military and Tucker Carlson and the reaction to him in just a moment. But I wanted to also talk about something else just before that. The Biden administration is now granting Venezuelans temporary protected status, something that just came out on the 8th, the beginning of this week, on Monday. And it was a departure, well, not even a departure, it's part of the open border immigration policy of Joe Biden. And this is kind of important because Venezuela, when I read this, I don't know if many people thought about this as well, but when I read about Venezuela and the Biden administration giving them access to America, I had to think, when did we last hear about Venezuela? What was the big thing we heard about Venezuela? And that's when I was reminded to the flashback from Town Hall, and it was Bernie Sanders. Now, this was published on January 2019. It still holds true. It was Venezuela that was being touted by then presidential candidate and current Senator Bernie Sanders, who said, this is a must read. You have to understand that, and I quote, "These days, the American dream is more apt to be realized in South America, in places such as Ecuador, Venezuela, and Argentina, where incomes are actually more equal today than they are in the land of Horatio Alger. Who's the banana republic now?" This was from 2011. If you want to find this, you can't. The link is ceased. Matter of fact, Bernie Sanders removed this from his page so that you cannot see it. And I'll show you right now, just so you can see this for yourself live. And it's going 404. U.S. Senator for Vermont, Bernie Sanders, has removed his statement saying that Venezuela is the American dream, that socialism is the American dream, that communism is the American dream. Now, I find that interesting because that same individual, Bernie Sanders, who believes in socialism and communism, who believes this is the way that America should act, he believes that in Bolivia, there was a coup, that the fact that the socialist government was forced out by the people of Bolivia and they rejected socialism, something that Bernie Sanders is a strong advocate of, that this was somehow incorrect. It was a travesty of justice. In fact, he goes on to say that I oppose the intervention of Bolivia's security forces in the democratic process and their representation of the indigenous protesters. When the military intervened and asked President Evo Morales to leave, in my view, that is called a coup. Except that's not exactly what happened. And I know a lot of people don't remember this story. It was from 2019, November of 2019. It was before COVID, before the 2020 election. No one was paying attention. But the thing you should have paid attention to is that it wasn't. As a matter of fact, a hero of the Latin American left, OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro, stated himself that in Bolivia, there was a coup d'etat on the 20th because Evo Morales committed election fraud. This is the reason why you don't hear about it. Because the communists and socialists of Bolivia tried to rig the election, and they tried to take away the will and power of the people. And that's something that Bernie Sanders was upset about, that he got caught. And because he got caught, he got kicked out of the country. And that's a problem for Bernie Sanders, because communism is a good thing. That's why he told us that very clearly when he was talking about Venezuela. Communism is a good thing. You should want communism. You should want to be a communist. And you know what? Because of that, we now see that Bolivian police have arrested former President Janine Áñez on terrorism and conspiracy charges. Not because she was president of Bolivia, but because she dared oppose the socialists when she was a senator. As we can see here, this is for reasons that this was about her time as an opposition senator, because she opposed socialism. The thing that Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, what they love, that's what he opposed. And the United States, and I'm going to get to the comments in just a second, but the United States has made this response about the reaction in Bolivia today. This is still coming out. This is breaking news. Julie Chung, the U.S. State Department's acting secretary, it's head of the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, said, quote, "Our friends and neighbors in Bolivia to uphold the civil rights and guarantee detainees due process. Quote, Americans and many across the Americas know from hard experience the need to safeguard and constantly renew democratic rule of, by, and for the people." You know what? How does this not remind you of the 2020 elections here in America, where a group of people were demonized because they didn't agree with one political faction? And that we have seen that as a result of that particular political faction winning an election, they have not only demonized the other side, they have used their powers, the powers of the government, to try and take over and to punish those that they did not agree with. And that's the reason why we now see that Joe Biden is giving Venezuelans temporary protected status, something that was already done by the prior administration, the Trump administration. They did that in December. It tells you something. It says something to you. That we are seeing a movement across many countries that came from America and now is coming back to America, where political extremists are punishing those that they don't agree with. In Venezuela, we saw the socialists take over, and they killed over 5,000 of their own people after disarming the people, after disarming the troops. That's why they're coming to America, why they're seeking asylum in the United States. Well, part of the reason why they're doing so. It's because of the movement towards socialism that has been promoted by people like Bernie Sanders that has caused this cycle of nations like Bolivia, like what we're seeing in Venezuela, where socialists have gotten power and they have demonized and punished innocent people simply for the fact that they don't agree. And how far are we from that in America at this time? I know we're hearing calls for unity from Joe Biden, but who is he really trying to unify? And who is he asking to submit? How much different is what Biden is doing than what we're seeing being done in Bolivia right now merely for having a different opinion. And I'd love to hear from people all across the world. And by the way, Hot Chicks, I see you. Hello. It's good to see you there. And Jesse mentions that this is Venezuela 2.0. It is. And this is a problem because it's reinforcing itself. Now, you may disagree. You may say, Mike, you just don't understand. It's not quite the same. I would love to hear that. I know we have people who watch the show down in Peru. Hello, Eduardo. And many other nations around the world. Agent Black over in Great Britain. Our friends in Germany and Canada. I look forward to hearing the rest of the world. Am I misunderstanding this? That the support of socialism, the mainstream love of socialism, like with Bernie Sanders and with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, that these individuals in the United States government promoting the socialization of not only America, but the rest of the world, has led to this feedback loop where we're seeing people being punished for the mere fact of having a different point of view whenever we see socialists take over. That's my assumption. Now, you may think I'm wrong. Maybe I misunderstand. Maybe I'm not getting all the details. But I think it's important because we're seeing that as these things happen, we see the end result. Today, we're seeing that in Bolivia, the socialist government is now punishing those who oppose them, and that ultimately will lead to the same thing we see in Venezuela. The socialist government fails, it collapses, the people are left without food, they're starving, their economy is broken, and they run to America begging for us to let them into our nation and to receive the generosity that we have because we're not a socialist nation. Hot Tricks mentions that Trump is still president of South America. I know South America tends to love President Trump, and there's a lot of good reasons for it. But not everyone agrees. And when I say that we're seeing a trend throughout the world where we're seeing more and more of socialist ideology, progressive ideology, this separation of people that has been limiting people's freedom and their will, I'm not kidding. Let's take a look. You think South America is just, well, it's a banana republic. It's too crazy. There's all kinds of problems there. Then look no further than Scotland. Scotland, just a day ago, passed a controversial hate crime law. This law in Scotland makes it a crime in your home to say something that may offend other people. Think about that. You can be arrested. You can be punished by the government because you said someone else finds to be offensive in your home. That's just insane. And going into this article by the BBC, even with Scottish government's insistence that the bar for prosecution is high, there are those who still believe this is an example of interference in private and family life. Why should any government, they ask, decide what can and can't be said in the privacy of one's home? Imagine that. Just imagine that you're in your home talking with your family, perhaps your friends, and anything that could be said about any subject. You don't like the Tom and Jerry movie. Maybe you're talking about that. Maybe you don't like having politics in your Star Wars. Maybe you think that Gina Carano shouldn't have been fired. What she said wasn't that bad. And because of that, you are now going to go to jail. Because the government said so. Because someone was offended. And if you think that can't happen in America, why not? Please, I'd like to hear. How are we not walking down those steps? We see that America constantly likes to follow the lead of what happens in Europe. Socialism was popular in Europe. It's now popular in the United States. Debt spending is popular in Europe. Now it's popular here. taking in refugees from Muslim countries without any kind of background check is popular in Europe. It's being done here in the United States. Gun control is rampant in Europe. It's being done in the United States. Let me ask you, why do you think this wouldn't happen in the United States either? Let me go to some of the comments. Star Raptor Flock says, oh yeah, they are agreeing with us on some of this. And talking about Scotland, they mention, I won't be surprised if the rest of Europe follows. Hot Chicks mentions, especially if you are insane. Jesse John mentions that it's insanity. And, oh, hello, Larry. Larry is back with us. Larry is a strong progressive, I think is fair to say. And we'll be talking about some issues that you'll like, Larry, because I know you're a supporter of BLM. So please stay in. It would never stick in an American court. How do you know that, Hot Chicks? Look at what we're seeing right now. We are in an environment that you can't speak on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter without being censored. We have calls directly from members like Senator Blumenthal who are saying that we need to increase the amount of censorship on what people can say on social media. We have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez declaring that people who opposed her point of view in an election need to be put into re-education camps, and she's threatened people with trying to murder her because they disagree with her. How far is to go from those kind of emotions to saying, oh, and you said something that offended someone in their home? I mean, we already have safe spaces in our colleges, and some have suggested that we should have safe spaces in our jobs and in our daily lives that exclude people, and that microaggressions exist because someone may be offended. We've changed TV and movies, and we have changed laws based on microaggressions that you may or may not even be aware of. In fact, we have Coca-Cola, which I'm about to get to. And that's a problem. But there are some more comments. Let me get to them. Just Larry mentions, free market socialism works in most developed countries. I'm a local conservative, though. I am sorry for misrepresenting you, Larry. I don't mean to misrepresent your position. I misunderstood it. Star Raptor Flock says, don't forget about AOC's blacklist. I have not. The Trump Accountability Project, which suddenly went dark once it was noticed that there are people, civilians, and perhaps members of the government that are putting together lists of individuals that have political positions they don't like, and they want to punish them for having those political positions. That is a fact. So to say that it's impossible for us to get to a place, or to say that it's not likely that we could get to a place like in Scotland where people cannot speak in their own homes without being fearful of being arrested for saying something that someone else overhears and may find offensive, at the same time that we have children that we are teaching in our schools to become more and more progressive, to more and more separate and to divide people based on their color and their ideology, their intersectionality, in other words, their gender and identity preferences. We are teaching children this. And we're reinforcing that in our businesses. I was going to talk about it in a moment, but let me get to it right now. Let's talk about Coca-Cola, because I want to make sure this is clear. Coca-Cola, they're in trouble right now. Because, remember, it was just February 24th when the news was that Coca-Cola was facing a backlash because they wanted their staff to be less white. That being white is a problem in corporate America. And Coca-Cola is not the only company doing this, but it is one of the biggest and one of the best followed. And they were being attacked from the right for saying, hey, people have to be less white. Being white is bad. That's the lesson there. Well, guess what? They're still in trouble because now the left is attacking Coca-Cola for not only doing what they said, but also because, well, as a corporation, they gave money to both sides, the right and the left. They gave $30,000 to some of the right-leaning members of government, or right-leaning individuals in the government who are seeking election. And because of that, now Black Voters, Black Voters Matter, an organization that describes itself as being a progressive, they want to increase progressive power, socialist power in America. This group is now saying, well, we have to attack Coca-Cola. If we can see Coca-Cola attacked on both sides for being too anti-white and at the same time not progressive enough, then where do you stand in your home without billions of dollars, thousands of lawyers? How are you going to fare? When it comes to your time, how are you going to get your case to the Supreme Court? You as an individual, Joe Blow, when they come after you, who's going to be protecting you? I can tell you who. This program, for one, standing up for your right as an American citizen to have a First Amendment and to say whatever you believe, as long as you are not inciting violence, that you have that right, whether I agree with it or not. And no one has the right to stop you, especially the government. Let me get back to some of the comments here. So we have, just Larry mentions, we have to stop using Venezuela as the example. How about Australia, Germany, Poland, Ireland, England, Canada? Just Larry is mentioning that these are touted, like most of the like the Dutch and the Swedes. These are touted by progressives as the examples of socialism working, except not one of those countries is a socialist country. There is no one in any of those governments. Sweden's come out and said it. Switzerland's come out and said it many, many times. They have denounced it, especially when Bernie Sanders has pointed to them and said, well, Sweden, yeah, Switzerland, those are socialist countries. And they have said it very clear. They're not socialist countries. They don't. They have socialist programs, so do we here in the United States. But that doesn't make us socialist. There is a difference. It is a very extreme difference. And not one of those examples you've mentioned, Australia, Germany, Poland, Ireland, England, Canada, not one is a socialist nation. There is no successful socialist nation in the history of socialism and communism. There isn't one. Hot Chicks mentions, how could they prove you meant what you said? Well, here's the thing about what's happening in Scotland and what I fear will happen in the United States, because we have many people like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, so many of them, and Senator Blumenthal, who want to censor what you say and how you say things. They don't care about proof. Remember, accusations equal guilt. We've seen that. That's the entire Me Too movement. It doesn't matter if you are proven innocent. It is the fact that you have been accused. That is all that is necessary, at least if you have the wrong think. That is, if you aren't a progressive and you say something, then there is no question about what you meant. It's only what you said, and that's good enough because someone found offense with it, and that's the problem. It's terrifying. Larry mentions that AOC has talent and heart. She just needs to listen more and act less. And I disagree with that completely. I think that AOC is talentless and a moron. And I don't believe that she has a heart. I believe she has a passion. She is a passionate partisan. She's a believer, but she doesn't care. She just has her belief and nothing else matters. That's my personal opinion. People may disagree with that. Hot Chicks mentions AOC is a child, which, again, I do agree with. Larry mentions that the problem isn't real and genuine socialist ideals. The problem is authoritarianism and corporate welfare. Big tech is an issue I can get behind. They're out of control. I agree with you. Big tech is out of control. We see way too much power in the hands of people like Jeff Bezos and Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg. Absolutely. But the real and genuine problem is socialist ideals. Socialism is predicated on the idea that you as an individual are meaningless, that you as an individual have no purpose. Only the society, only the socialist structure is important, and it strips people's individual freedoms. I have seen it. I have lived it. I've been in Moscow. I have watched it happen. I have seen the results of that, and I tell you that I wish that upon no one. And if you don't believe me, go and ask anyone who has left a socialist nation. Ask the people who have escaped from Venezuela, who have escaped from Bolivia, Peru, Cuba, the Soviet Union, China. Lily Tang Williams is a great example. Ask them about what socialism is and how it actually functions, and then tell me that the socialist ideals are not a problem, because I can point to tens of millions of people who disagree with that, and we can look at over 100 million dead bodies around the world that socialism killed. Yeah, it's a problem. Jesse asks, isn't this racist for Coca-Cola being attacked on both sides? Quite possibly. Tony Zoranda mentions, you see the video with Mrs. Obama encouraging a child to undergo a sex change. Absolute lunacy. I have not seen that video, so I cannot comment on it. I will say that any child that is encouraged to make a decision about their gender, their sexual preferences, before they make that choice themselves, especially if they are not 18, is wrong and probably criminal, because you are potentially destroying someone's life before they have enough experience to make that choice for themselves. That's my position on that, and I stand by that. You're 18, you're an adult, you want to make a decision about your life and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, go right ahead. If you're under 18, no, don't do it. Don't let anyone else do it. Anyone who does do that is harming a child, in my opinion. And I'm more than happy to say that publicly and directly. Let me continue with the comments. Hot Chicks mentions Coca-Cola is CIA. I don't know about that. They could be. I'm sure there are elements of the CIA in many corporations, as well as the Mossad, the KGB, and its remnants. There are spies in every major multinational corporation in the world. It's too much money and power for them not to. What influence they have, that's a different question. Larry mentions, I'm guilty too, but we have to stop the left versus right. We're fighting each other while power brokers have no meanings other than control. They use us and laugh when we fight. I agree with you that there are power brokers that are using the left and the right as a means to gain more power for themselves. BLM is a great example of that. Antifa is an example of that. The Democratic Socialists of America, especially the Ithaca chapter, are a great example of that. Indivisible New York is an example of that. But at the same time, it is a left versus right thing. When I have to say, I believe in the First Amendment, I believe in the Second Amendment, and I need to say that these laws being passed by progressive leaders are detrimental to America. Is that a left versus right discussion? Yes, it is. Are there power brokers who are taking advantage of that on both sides? There may well be. That doesn't change. It is still a discussion that needs to be had, I believe. Larry mentions that it's buffering on YouTube. Larry, get used to it. I am. We speak honestly and directly about issues that affect America, our Constitution, and the world. And it is not the position that YouTube, that Google, that Twitter, that Facebook, they don't like that. They don't like it coming from a black Republican, a black Hispanic Republican. I violate their worldview. So yeah, expect there to be a lot of buffering because they don't like these keywords. We're talking about freedom and they don't like that. Hot Chicks mentions progressives are mostly disgruntled Democrats. I would say it's even worse than that. There are many Democrats, and I do make a difference between Democrats, liberals, and progressives. They're not the same thing. A socialist is a progressive, I believe, but not a Democrat as a socialist. There is a difference there. Larry's talking about free market socialism, that he has a good friend from Australia that would be happy to come onto your show. He has a show too, full of socialist medicine. You know what? I have many friends who are socialists. I have many friends who are in Australia and around the world, and they would be happy to disagree. But I would be interested in speaking with him, possibly. Let him get my contact information, and if there's something for the show, sure, I'll have him on. I have no problem with that. Star Raptor mentions that Bernie used to praise Venezuela before it went to hell. That was my point in 2011. Jesse mentions that, yeah, there is a lot of people are going to be seeing delays, and please work through them buffering us. They're going to be slowing down this channel. They want you to go away. They don't want you to interact. They don't want you to find out what we're talking about. So please stay on with us and work through that. I know my signal is going out at about 4 times what is necessary to reach you. If it's not reaching you, it's because the major media is trying to stop us. Larry mentions, I'm just scanning through to catch up to everyone in the messages. Larry thinks that AOC cares, and that's fine. You can have that opinion. I don't share it. Larry's trying to mention that there's a great example of successes in socialism, and I would say, please tell me where. What is the success of socialism? I am unaware of it. I am unaware of anyone I know who's lived in a socialist nation that is aware of it. Please do tell me, what is the success of socialism? No one has ever stopped you from calling in, Larry. No one, I've never stopped anyone from calling in. The phone number is 607-242-1582. What I have told you is you don't get to control the show. You don't get to control the time. You will have as much time as we give to anyone else who calls into the show, not more. I've said that many times. You can call in anytime you want. Tony mentions that there is so much propaganda that both sides are having a difficult time finding middle ground, and the fact checking is not helping. They cause a bigger divide. So let me say that we've just hit on 3 different things, and see the intensity here. And we've already seen the reaction, because my signal output has not changed, and the social media has. They are trying to slow it down. They're trying to manage what we are able to hear. This is the problem, and why I think it's important for us to talk about the fact that Coca-Cola is being attacked from the left and from the right for being on the left. They have shifted to the left. One moment. Hello, and thank you for calling in. This is No Soundbites Allowed with your host, Michael Voss. Who's on the line?
This is Jesse. How's it going, Mike?
Hey, Jesse. And folks, just like Jesse, you too can call in at 607-242-1582. Jesse, what do you want to speak about?
You guys were just talking about Venezuela, and also like how someone was talking about like socialism works somewhere in the world.
Yes.
The only thing I can think of that could possibly even be close to that would be like a Nordic country, like Sweden, for instance.
Sweden is not socialist. Sweden has come out. They have directly refuted that when and I just want to mention this, and I'll let you continue. But to be up to date, when Bernie Sanders said that the Nordic countries were socialist, their prime ministers came out and said that is absolutely false. It is not true. That is not the case. So I just want to debunk that right off for anyone who has that idea. It is not true. But go on.
No, I mean that was about it. I was just thinking about the fact that even if that was true,
Mhm.
The sheer size of their population could possibly make something like that work. I think that the density and the amount of people in this country to distribute wealth like that would never work ever.
Well, yeah, you're talking about countries that have about as many people as New York City.
Exactly.
It's a very different scale than 330 million people. And the Nordic countries also happen to be all of one, almost entirely homogeneous. In other words, if you're from, say, Sweden, almost everybody in Sweden is Swedish. It's like 96% of the population.
Right.
With all the same background, all the same beliefs, and all the same language. And that goes back hundreds of years. The United States isn't like that, not even close. So that is also a factor that does affect a lot of things when you're saying, hey, socialism works or doesn't work. Diversity isn't very beneficial towards socialism, I believe. Would you say
Yes,
that's true?
yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and I say that because here's an aspect of it, and tell me what you think about this. You don't have to agree with me. You can tell me you think I'm wrong. But my experience in the Soviet Union, I lived in Tbilisi, which is in Soviet Georgia. I lived in Moscow itself, a little time in Riga, which is over in Latvia. And I watched all the different peoples. And the only way that socialism worked in the Soviet Union for 75 years is that all of those separate people, there's about 130 different peoples that make up what we think of as the Soviet Union.
Right.
They were all controlled under the iron fist of the government. And that's the only way it worked. And the moment that fist was taken away, almost all of the Soviet Union, what we thought of as the Soviet Union,
yeah,
collapsed and went into civil wars.
Yep.
Because it doesn't work. The socialist ideas do not work without a government oppressing the people and denying them their individuality. You see
Right.
that in China right now with the Uyghurs, where they're being genocided by the Chinese government because communism says you can't be an independent person. I mean, that's how I understand that.
Right, correct, absolutely.
Would you say that does that match what you think, or am I misunderstanding?
No, absolutely. It makes a complete sense. I mean, that's why we gained all those countries after the USSR broke up.
Yeah.
Because they were independent countries again. They weren't just under Soviet rule.
Yeah, and they all have different beliefs, and they have different goals, and they have different interests, which doesn't work under socialism because everyone has to be on the same page for the same exact goal. You can't do that and be independent.
Correct.
That's my understanding and my experience of socialism, which is and I think that's a little different. Let me ask you, Jesse, and thank you for calling in. We love to have people on the show. My understanding has always been that when you take away, let me rephrase it. Would you be happy to have all the things you could want? Theoretically, house, car. You can have a car, not a good car, but a car. You can have a house, not a big spacious one, but a house. And you could have food, not steak every day, but you could have some food, but you can't be you. You can't say anything. You can't do things that are allowed by the government. Would that be a trade-off that you would want?
No, of course not. That means that there's no room for you to improve your life or your living situation or your own gain and success.
Okay. Can you?
So that's why, that's socialism in America. I mean, for a majority of Americans, don't want it. There's the people that want to live like an American, and the people that don't really want to work hard and they want things handed to them. I'm not saying all of them, but a large majority, huge majority of the people that are for socialism. I mean, most of these people don't even know the details of it. They just want things to be handed to them, and it's almost a crime.
I'm always amazed that I'm often told I don't know about socialism, even though I've lived, not visited. I didn't vacation in. Bernie went on a vacation for his honeymoon to the Soviet Union. I lived there for a year and a half.
Right.
And I lived with the people every day. And thankfully, I had more money than the average person because I'm an American. I was doing work there. And yet, I'm told, well, you don't understand what true socialism is. I've lived it. I've talked to people like Lily Tang Williams, who I've interviewed on this show before.
And eventually, I mean, I used to work with a couple Slavic people as well, and people from the Union as well. And I remember during I was a hockey player, and during the '90s, we had the Red Army on the Detroit Red Wings, and and that 5-player line literally all had a defect from Russia. They weren't allowed. They weren't funded by the government. They honestly, once communism and socialism gets set ingrained like that, you become a prisoner of that nation.
Okay, hold on one second. Whoever's calling from the 315 number onto the show, I do want to take your call. I just want to finish with this call first. Please, once I'm done calling, the person who just called me on the 315 number, I don't know who it is, call back, and then I'll let you onto the line. Just so you know, I'm not taking your call, but we are still speaking. So go ahead.
No, I mean that's pretty much it. I was just trying to make a point that I think that once socialism or whatever, communism, whatever you want to call it, gets to a certain point, you actually become a prisoner of that nation in all aspects. Like you can't leave and all that. So I don't think that would happen here. But like I said, I mean those Russian players literally had to be like smuggled out of Russia.
Yeah, and that's a true fact. There was even that movie with Yakov Smirnoff talking about it. Was it Moscow Over the Hudson? I think it was back in the late 80s, talking exactly about that. And freedom was still worth it. I mean, it was a beautiful movie. I suggest a lot of people see that if you haven't seen it before. It was with Robin Williams as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mike, well, I'll let you go because I know you have another call waiting.
I thank you, Jesse. I find it important. Thank you for giving your voice to the show.
Appreciate your time, Mike. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
All right. And so let me catch up here. Larry mentions that an iron... Oh, 1 second. Well, we always enjoy having people call into the show. It's going to be active today. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am the host, Michael Voss, and I am speaking with...
Hey, Mike, it's Larry. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Always. You've always been welcome to call anytime you want it.
I know, and you have, and you've never blocked me and never done any of that. And I do want to start off by apologizing. We just got through a very, very, very emotional election, just overall year, I would say, but certainly add the election to it. I've lost a mutual friend of ours, Claudia Tenney, who I've supported for almost 20 years. I've worked on every campaign until this one, and it's unfortunate, but I hope, all of us can just prevailing level heads, agree to disagree and have good discussion. But I do apologize because it got the best of me as well.
Well, let me add on from my part, to be fair, and also, I'm sure that I have been sharper, perhaps at times, for conversations that we had in the past without saying, hey, let me calm down in the future. So for that, if I've done that, I will say I apologize for that as well. And as I always said,
appreciate that. You're
always welcome to be on the program like anyone is.
And you've always said that, and I do appreciate it. You've always been like that, and I got to say, but no, it's any backlash you've given is well deserved. I would have probably blocked me, so don't worry. I appreciate your patience. Mm-hmm. But no, on this subject, look, I mean, I know I've talked about it, and we joked about it, so I hate even talking about it now. Mm-hmm. But I was a county legislator for a short period here in Oneida County,
yes, you were.
Not too far from you. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got to know Claudia years and years ago. And because she was, of course, a Republican, I got elected as a Democrat, but I was a strong conservative. I was always, our local conservative party is always, they ranked me number one, which got me in trouble with my own party. When I lost my reelection, I lost it not because of the Republicans. My own party came out. I was in a district similar to yours where overwhelmingly Democrat. So it wasn't because I was, beaten by my own party.
Right.
And so
I've seen a lot of that lately.
Yeah, I fought the Democrats way more than I fought Republicans, way more. But I don't consider myself, now I switched to Republican, and but I never considered myself one of these kind of Democrats. And by that I mean not AOC, Not, yes, there are some that are a little out there, but I don't think AOC is really one of them, to be honest. I think she's genuinely. I know you disagree, and I respect that, but I genuinely think she genuinely cares. She has a lot of energy and passion.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's finding a hard way of she's realizing how hard it is. I think in a way, I know you're going to disagree, and this might offend people. She is in a way the left wing's version of Donald Trump on the right wing. They are both outsiders. The establishment, I know this from talking to people that still work. I have a good friend who is pretty high up in Chuck Schumer's office.
Ooh,
and they hate her with a passion. So what that tells me is she's doing something, or she's at least trying to do something right. And that's what I liked about Trump, and that's why I voted for Trump.
Well, let me interject.
I did it this year, though, but I voted for him in 2016.
Okay, and let me interject a moment here, because yes, it's been documented that there was at the beginning of the year, this year, there was a call amongst the Democratic Party, the House members, where they were talking about their agenda going forward, and several of the Democrats had talked about the socialist agenda, the AOC agenda, progressive agenda, and how it had to stop because it was endangering some people getting elected. So it is very clear that there are many Democrats who oppose her. Now, I think that's mostly because she's not effective and she doesn't care whether she's effective or not. She cares about the ideology. And that's one of my biggest problems with AOC. I don't know her as a person. I know her policies. And her policies are very easily seen as being antithetical to the American way of life, the quality of life that we have right now. And that's my problem.
Yeah, and I respect that. I really do. I think, I disagree, obviously, only on the part that in my history in politics, and I know you have a long one too, what I always look at is not what they want us, what they're trying to get us. For example, I still have questions about what's going on with this Cuomo thing.
Yeah.
Now, I can't stand Cuomo. I actually witnessed in his conference room once. I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2000, I believe it was 9, 10, whatever it was, when we were going through the whole casino deal up here. And
I think that was in 2010.
Me and Claudia were strong allies on this, and I was fighting it. Cuomo came in and did his crooked deal here and gave away basically the whole county to King Halliburton. And so we went down to Albany, and they were pushing for a vote. And I sat with me and 3 other county legislators, including the minority leader, and we sat there in his conference room with him, 2 of his thugs that I swear to you, they looked like a couple of guys that were in the 1980s mob movie or something. And they had black leather jackets on, the whole nine. And they're sitting there, standing over him like bodyguards. And he's pounding his fist on his table. And he turns to me and he goes, and who the hell, yells, "Who do you think you are?" And I looked at him. I go, "Who do you think you are?" I go, "You don't impress me." I go, I what are you going to do? Take away my $8,000 a year county ledge job? Do you think I care? And I got up and I walked out on him. And of course, that was the year I lost my reelection. But nonetheless, yeah. So I wanted to say that just to illustrate how much dislike I have for him. But I do have a question over what's going on now. I always look for, the old Kansas City shuffle. They want you to look one way. Well, what's really going on is the other way. You notice what nobody's talking about right now?
16,000 people that died and the political corruption that allowed that to not be talked about.
I knew you would know the answer to that. I knew you would. It was almost a rhetorical question, because I know you know. But a lot of it, I wish more people would pay attention. So what's really going on, I think, is that there may be more than just Cuomo involved in this. And there's a lot of politicians like Chuck Schumer now, Gillibrand.
Well, let me ask you a question.
That are circling their wagons, and they want him to go down now.
No, let me ask.
I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I'm just saying I hope they don't get away with it.
Well, see, and here's the question I want to ask you, because you've been in the Democratic Party, and so you may be more familiar with some of the inner workings than I am. Let me ask you, it seems to me that they have changed the story from 16,000 people dying in a nursing home and the corruption that allowed that to be hidden from the American people, and would not have been revealed if not for the pressure behind people saying, show us the numbers. And we've seen this with Governor Newsom and Governor Whitmer and Governor Wolf. But staying on Cuomo, they've changed the story. And I think it's because if they stayed on 16,000 people died, this was completely hidden for political reasons, it would reveal that more people, not just Cuomo, not just his secretary, but there's a chain of people going back to the Democratic legislature that knew this, knew the fact that 16,000 people died, that the COVID policy we took in 2020 was not being effective, at least on certain points, were not effective, and if not counterproductive, and to protect the entire Tammany Hall style structure, they said, okay, sexual assault is easy. We don't have to talk about anyone else except Cuomo, so we're going to focus on that, and that will get him out, and no one will talk about the corruption that gave him the power to do these terrible things that cost people's lives. Am I misunderstanding that, or is that correct?
No, God, I'm excited. This is the Mike I started following back about 10 years ago, and I know, like I said, we had the rough time, but God, you just articulated it perfectly. That is exactly what I believe is happening. I think that Letitia James, whether accidentally or in a very bold move, but not thought out very well, uncovered something that was deeper than she thought. And they are now circling their wagons. And they said, we got to change the narrative, change the story. We got to cover this up. They're telling James probably that, you know what, you take care of us. We'll let this slide. But mark my words, this is just my prediction, and I could be wrong. But just from the track record and what I've witnessed, and I was never any big shot, but one of my first jobs in politics when I was in my 20s, right before I became a legislator, was I actually worked for the New York State Senate Democratic Campaign Committee, which was right across the street from the Capitol. And I remember that was the year 2006 when Patterson and Spitzer were running. So I met them several times in the office, and it was for a young kid, it was a, very good experience, I guess. I don't, it was kind of like I was meeting celebrities. Nowadays, I would have just, like I did to Cuomo, walked out. But, so I witnessed it back then, and I'm seeing it happen. We've seen it in New York. I mean, you look at when Hevesy went down, and not saying these people didn't deserve it, but what I'm saying is I always watch where we're not looking. The story is always the bad guy, but these guys all have bad stuff. So what is the motivation for them taking them down now? Cuomo was untouchable before that thing came out. He was untouchable. He had 40 million in the bank. This guy was talked about as the next president, a cabinet appointee, possible attorney general. And overnight, he's being told to resign by the Senate Majority Leader, his fellow state senator, senior senator from his state. That tells me something big's going on that they're trying to cover up. And I also predict that Letitia James is next on their list once Cuomo goes. Just like when they thought they got rid of Spitzer, they figured they could control Patterson. Yes, Patterson had the discretions. We all know that, but they didn't take him down because of that. They took him down because they realized Patterson was not playing their games.
Well, and I would say this. It is my belief that Letitia James is taking an opportunity here to take on Cuomo so that she can run for governor. And I think they're supporting that because they think that elevating her position from attorney general to governor will give them more control over her.
That could be.
And when I say
it can fit their narrative of, first female, first African American.
Exactly.
I hate to go down that route, but let's face it, that's what's going on.
That's the reality of politics today. And I want to be very clear that when I say they, I mean Democratic leadership, not necessarily rank and file Democrats. Progressives, again, are a separate issue of that. The Democratic Socialists of America, which is AOC, and down in Ithaca, they're separate too. We're talking about Democratic leadership here, and that's what really controls a lot of New York politics.
The only time we butt heads is when we go on to national policy issues and the right versus left.
Well, we're going to be talking about that.
I do believe, I know, but it's okay. I enjoy the discussion. But, you know, I think when we get on to statewide, and it doesn't have to apply, by the way, just to New York State, we got to remember you have people all around the world listening to you and around the country.
Yeah.
And I want them all to know, as I'm sure you already do, the famous quote by Tip O'Neill: all politics is local.
Absolutely.
And we need to focus. When you want to make changes, yes, it's great to talk these policies and to talk these national elections, but the best way you can make these changes is go out there and elect your state representatives, your local county representatives. That's where they start to corrupt these people, right at the bottom.
And that's why I always say you have to go out and vote. You have to be involved in the petition process that's going on right now. You have to get the right people into a position so that they can get elected, so that they're not under the thumb,
I meant
left or right.
You would make an amazing state rep. I am back to the Democratic Party now. However, I am not involved on the committees, despite people wanting me to. I refuse to do it. I want nothing to do with the establishment. I am a JFK Democrat, kind of. I'm a conservative Democrat. I do believe there's a place for socialist programs. Every country does. What I don't like is saying, you know, socialism is, well, Venezuela. It goes way beyond socialism, the problems in those countries. And don't get me wrong, there were Democratic leaders, along with even Republicans, that were in the establishment. That's why Trump was so popular. He was like the Republican of me. He hated the establishment. He was not part of the, you know, these guys that sell their soul, Mitt Romneys and that, just to look good and, you know, try to be part of the country club. He went out and said what he had to say, and he didn't care what party you were in. He took you on.
And that may be true, but I disagree. And let me be clear. And it's fine. We don't have to agree. It's fine. And I want people to understand in the show, it's not about you have to agree with me. It's not about that. We can have a reasonable discussion, point out different points, and say, okay, and we don't agree. That's fine. It's about understanding. If we don't understand each other, we don't understand where we're coming from, we can't get there. Now, my problem when we're talking about Venezuela, I can't say that socialism was the only thing. There are other problems with the government, but I think that's one of the key factors that led to what we then saw, because that going to socialism then allowed them to strip the people of their firearms, which then empowered the government to be the only one with firearms to then go out and kill its own people. As reported by the New York Times in 2018, they killed 5,200 people. That's a problem. And that
I agree with you.
From socialism.
And I'll admit to you that's why I like, and I've read all of Bernie's books and that, and people would say, well, he just said he's a conservative Democrat. How does he like Bernie? Well, I also loved Ron Paul, for example.
He's a great man. I love Ron Paul.
Oh, amazing. Ron Paul was, you know, I was a huge Ron Paul fan back then. And then I went, and that's why, you believe it or not, when you get on you go down to the grassroots level, a lot of Ron Paul supporters were also Bernie supporters, and people go, how? And it's a lot to do with their personalities too, but that they're not part of the establishment. But also you have to admit, they're very smart men. They do dig deep into what they believe, even if you disagree with it.
I've never said that the only person I've ever called stupid is AOC.
And I understand.
And everyone else, Bernie, Pelosi, Schumer, you name them, I've never said they're stupid. I don't agree with them. I think that some of the things they do are illogical, but I've never called anyone else stupid because I don't think they're stupid people. They're very smart people. They're just very dangerous in some of their policies, especially when left unchecked by the public. But Larry, we do have a couple of people who want to call in.
Yeah, sorry. I'm glad I got to talk to you, though. No,
you're always welcome to call into the show. We do it every week, and I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts, and we'll hear more from you. There's no problem with that. But I also want to give some other people.
Good luck to you, and let's go for assembly in next year. Let's get ready.
You know what? That's not a no. I'm not saying no. Okay.
That's what I like to hear. All right. You have a good Sunday.
Okay. And thank you. And folks, so like as you've seen with Jesse, you see with Larry, you can, of course, always call into the program. The phone number is 607-242-1582. In fact, it's possible over my head right now on the screen. I was just on with him, so I didn't get a chance to say that. So yes, everyone is allowed to come in and talk about anything they want to. That's what the show is about. Not about agreement, but being able to have these conversations. The more of us that talk, the more of us can understand, the better kind of government we can create and to lead ourselves forward with. Now, I know we're talking a lot today about Cuomo and why he's still in power, why he's trying to be impeached, but that isn't the only thing I would like to also mention on. And also how this affects us with the future on the path we're going down, which is going to lead us to the Scottish government saying that you can't say things in your own home without potentially being punished by the government. It's the same overreach. If you can tell people that they can or cannot come into and out of their homes, then you can control whether people are able to say things in their homes. And I'll go back to the Operation COVID Crush COVID, which was done at the county level. County Executive Jason Garnar, who I do know, who said that people were in solitary confinement every other day. This was in April of 2020 as part of the COVID protocol, complete violation of civil rights. And if you can do that unofficially with the full power of the government, yeah, you can tell people that they can and can't say things in their homes. But I also want to mention something else. And of course, I'm looking at your comments. I'm trying to keep up with them all. And I see many people who don't agree with socialism, but do understand different socialist programs. And I'm going to get to a couple of socialist programs coming up in a moment. And we're also going to be talking about pregnant women in the military, I hope. And we're going to be talking about what's going on with BLM. But I did also want to mention there's a problem that's going on in our country right now. On top of all of what we're talking about right now, there's another corruption, another deception that we're seeing in our government. And that's very simple. Here is the letter that I sent out to the United States Treasury. Okay? And in this letter, I just want to make sure you can see it so you can see. This was sent out, and it was sent out on March 9th, asking for a response before today for this program. And what we noticed is that the United States debt, as of, that was on, I believe it was on December 21st, was $27.5 trillion. The government had spent $6.7 trillion. The income tax had received $3.4 trillion. The numbers were changed. They were flipped. They were reversed or frozen in time. I'm not really quite sure. And it's continuing at this moment. The current U.S. debt is $28 trillion. If you do the math, and I have, we have an increase in the national debt of $260,000 per minute. I want to be very clear about that. Per minute. We have $260,000 increase per minute. And just to be clear, between what we saw on December 21st and right now is impossible. The numbers are wrong. That doesn't count the two $1.9 trillion spending bills that we've seen the United States government approve and send checks out for already. You are being lied to right this second. The government is not telling you the truth. This is a problem, and it is not being reported. The U.S. debt should be at about $32 trillion, counting all of the money that's been spent on the COVID relief. It's currently sitting at $28 trillion. And the reason why I believe that that is not being updated, that you are not being told the truth, is because the amount of inflation and deflation of your money is worth less, roughly about 25 cents less after the extra spending that happened. That means when you go to the store, you need more money to be able to pay for the same thing you had to buy on December 21st as versus today. They are bankrupting your pockets. They're taking money out of your pocket and then giving you back a check for less than they took out of your pocket. And they're saying, don't you feel good? Aren't we doing a great job? This is a problem, and we need to call it out. And I've asked the United States Treasury to explain why these numbers don't add up, that they are wrong, that there is a deception of the United States public. And as of this moment, they have yet to respond to this channel as either a news media program, even though we do political commentary. We are members of the news, and they have not responded to us as a United States citizen. That is a problem. You are being lied to right now. And again, I show you the proof. 28 trillion, December 21st, 27.5 trillion, 6.7 trillion for the federal spending, 6.7. So we froze all the federal spending. We didn't spend $4 trillion since December 21st. That is a lie. And we have the proof of that, in case you're wondering. It's in several of the calls that we have, several of the videos we have done between December 21st and today. Let me also go on. To mention, and I see Sean has mentioned that the military is not a socialist program. No one would ever say that. And Tony Zarunda has mentioned, I took off the wrong thing. I apologize, folks. I didn't mean to take that off. Tony mentioned that my house, my rules, government stopped at my driveway. And as much as we would like to believe that, if that was too true, Tony, that my house, my rules, government stops at my door, then we wouldn't have to worry about the COVID restrictions that we have right now, because my business, my house, not my rules. And you can't, and 1 second. Well, we have a lot of people calling in today, and we love that. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss. Who is this?
This is Shauna from the First Ward, Binghamton.
Hey,
and
Shauna.
Token Libertarian. How do you do, Mike?
You're not a token at all. You are a libertarian, and it's good to hear from you.
Yes, it's good to hear from you two. I was glad when I got a moment to hop on today after church and cheesecake to see that you were broadcasting live. So what exactly is the topic? Because there seems to be a few that are convoluted into each other.
Well, I wouldn't say they're convoluted in my thought, but perhaps they are. The Sunday program at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is always just talking on several subjects that the media will not address. And there tends to be themes behind it. In this case, we're talking about the corruption of the government on different levels and how it's affecting people's lives, whether it's the Coca-Cola backlash, whether it's Cuomo refusing to resign, even though there's corruption and crimes that have been committed, the problems with trying to adapt our military, which I haven't gotten to yet, adapt our military to take care of pregnant women, or even some of the other issues that I want to get to a little bit later, which is the George Floyd autonomous zones, where we're allowing, which is a problem, where we have literal insurrection going on in our country. The media doesn't want to talk about it at all because they have an agenda.
Well, it's what kind of insurrection is it? Because, you have your organic things, which led to the revolution of 1776, which the United States, through our representatives, declared its independence from the crown, right? And then, tar and feathers was a popular thing, along with pitchforks and torches. Yeah. But when we think of government, what is government? It's a creature of man's law, right? This thing is a bodiless, soulless, brainless creature of man's law, in contradistinction to you and I as creatures of God's law. However you want to personify the abstract concept of God, which is why the founding fathers did not establish a national religion, though it can be said that the United States was founded on Christian principles, and we see those reflected through our laws of action that are for this creature of law we call government. And then the founding fathers fragmented this creature of government into three parts, right? somebody needs to decree the law. That comes from this creature's mind, right? So that's why we have a legislative branch, correct?
Well, I'm following where you're going with this.
Okay, and then and then we have, and those powers are limited, and we can get into that, but as far as we're looking at it, we're looking at this composite person and its composite brain and the things and the faculties required to put these actions into motion, right? These, which is an executive decision. Right? Mm-hmm. Is that you make your law, you say, I will do this thing, I shall do this thing. However, you compel yourself to do that thing or to not do that thing.
More so
and
not,
then, yes, and then you choose, right, to execute that action, and then you assume any liability for any injuries that you may have caused in choosing to execute this action. So that's when you test yourself, right? It's much like a scientific process, but it's for your intellect in anything that you do, right? When you go to the store and you're deciding what brand of laundry detergent to buy, you are using that judiciary part of your thinking to make a decision, right?
On a personal level. So you're comparing the government as a
composite person. It's a creature.
Yeah.
It's a creature.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who
but
say
like
that. Yes.
like I said, this creature cannot execute its own actions because it is bodiless. It can't decree the law because it has no brain. Okay, and it can't do any of the things like we can as humans. So that's why we faction off these different things. It's in the same concept as like a jury, which makes up what is called at law, creature of law, called a reasonable person.
See,
because those.
If I may, there's, just so you know, and so other people understand, there is a certain difference I have with a core element of what you're speaking about. I would look at the government, and any government is
but in order to understand where the corruption is coming from, you have to understand the purpose of government and how the law is supposed to work. The law is what is, and you can Google this. I'll make it easy for you. Just Google it with the Federalist Papers.
I've read them.
Law is a rule of action for this creature of law we call government. And then we divide that up into the three faculties of this composite brain. And then we elect and sometimes they're appointed, but we can get into that later, into offices to carry out those actions, because this creature can't do that because it is a principality. It is an abstract. It's a straw man on paper. It's a personification on paper of this abstract concept, okay, of this bodiless body.
But let me clarify. See, there's a perception, a core perception that I believe is a little different, and maybe it makes a difference. Government is a brain without a body. It is a social contract that lives and breathes by the function of the people who are within it, which is why we
actually it's not a social contract.
It is.
that those two words are silly upon their face, because in order to enter a contract, it has to be done so. Okay, one, we both have a right to negotiate the terms, so we see it as, beneficial to beneficial. I mean, this is, one of the main points that Ayn Rand was making in Atlas Shrugged, right? Is everything does come down to a contract, but you can't, and everything does. Marriage is a contract. When you buy and sell, you are trading, you are contracting. It all boils down to contract. You have to consent to contract with somebody. Okay, so when you talk of like a social contract, well, where was I when this was being negotiated?
That was a social contract created before you. You walked into this existing contract.
Well, see, I didn't consent to it then. So how can I be held to a contract to which I didn't, or a contract
you don't have to.
I did not? but you do,
leave.
because this is the fundamental crux of contract law.
You don't have to accept the contract. You can leave the United States. You are not held here.
But see, that's not what the Constitution is. What the Constitution is are rules of action for this composite creature, right?
It's a
so
contract.
if we look, if it's not a contract. Okay, it's not a contract.
Okay, I believe it is. It is a contract.
It's rules. It is, well, people consent to it for certain things. Okay, so one of the purposes of the Constitution was to make trade regular. Okay, and when you make something regular, you make it equal for everybody to obtain access to that these things are equally, that everybody has equal rights to them. Okay, so two main things would be highways and water. Okay, because people need to have the freedom to travel. The problem is when you have issues with people claiming ownership of these things. What government is supposed to do is to keep people from adversely taking ownership of these things, like setting up a toll booth. You know, this is why you have to get licenses and permits to use the roads for private gain at public expense. Because if one person can set up like a lemonade stand on the road, then why can't another one put up a toll booth? You know, and then we have a problem, because then that's going to hinder trade, okay? And that's always what most conflicts boil down to, are trade issues in commercial activity, particularly in trafficking goods and or services, right? Like take, for example, the drug war. Okay, what that has done, it has now made commercial activity irregular, because these factions of people who are selling these drugs without the government blessing, okay, what's happening with them is they're having an argument over a contract. Okay, well, you promised me you were going to give me $200, and I gave you an ounce of the finest weed on the planet, and you didn't pay me, and now I'm out my product, that the fruits of my labor. However you might disagree with what it is, okay, it's not your right to decide, because this is America and people have freedom over their personal property, one of which is their body. But the point here is the contract, okay? We had somebody who was in breach of contract now, because now there was a debt acquired by possessing of somebody else's weed, and you both contracted tit for tat, and you're now in breach of the contract because you failed to tender that debt that you owed him of $200. So normally these people would just go to court under one of the contracting torts and settle it out civilly. But no, we can't do that, because now we have this war. They can't take this to court. So then what ends up happening? They take it into their own hands. And the one party who is the injured party, and then you have the other party who is basically engaged in a criminal activity here. Well, you know, which wasn't the selling of weed; it was not tendering that debt.
Well, let me ask you a question, Sean.
What?
So that people are following us and they're following what's going on at the show and why this is relevant. Let's take that idea. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is insurrection. Okay, and this is something that's ongoing right now. So let's put it real world. We have insurrection that's going on, which is defined as an act or instance of revolt against civil authority or an established government.
Well, again, it comes down to where the civil authority comes from.
That's not my question.
What is civil authority? I mean, how was it explained to you? See, this is the problem I have is I'm trying to establish a language with people because it's like everybody's talking a different language. And as I've said in the comments, and I've worked for the Green Party. I helped the Green Party get ballot access in 2010. I did campaign here a lot for Howie Hawkins. And I'm also a libertarian, okay? So I can tell you that when I say words like capitalism, the socialists think that it's when like Monsanto gets subsidy money to grow their seed. That's what they think capitalism is. And bank bailouts are part of capitalism as well, I'm learning, which I know as a card-carrying capitalist that's not true. Meanwhile, the Republicans think capitalism is when the government takes our money and then gives it to corporations, and then those corporations create jobs because government is deciding our markets.
Government
that's not capitalism either. But when you say something like civil authority, what does that even mean?
Yes, but I'm trying to.
Well,
civil authority is very simple.
The fundamental crux of that authority comes from, where does that authority come from?
Shauna, you got to hear me on. This is my show. You got to hear me. So very simply, when I'm talking about civil authority, we're talking about the police, we're talking about the military, we're talking about those executive department individuals, which would include the police.
Okay, well, what does the Constitution say about that for New York State?
The New York State Constitution,
the various states?
or which Constitution? Because
it depends on where they're claiming their authority comes from.
Shauna, what I'm trying to talk about here is I want to get to talking about George Floyd. You're talking about a very ideological situation, and that's an entirely different discussion for a different show. What I want to talk about is, and I'm trying to get to, and it's perfectly fine for you to have this, but it's not the direction that we were talking about today, and I don't think most people are following it because it's not connected to the things we were talking about today. So I want to talk about, we can either reference it towards Governor Cuomo and his currently being removed, whether it's because of the corruption or whether it's a distraction of that corruption, or in particular talking about what's going on with the George Floyd Autonomous Zone, where we have a group of individuals who have hijacked land and individuals in that land and done so to circumvent the laws that exist in our country at this time, which is an insurrection, to achieve a goal based on their personal preferences, which is a violation of the social contract that we have, which is a violation of our laws. And I think that's very important.
That's what you're claiming, and that's what, for the longest. Well, I take objection that I have absolutely no idea what you mean by the words you say, like I've explained with social contract. There's no social contract.
Yes, there is.
This is just made up Orwellian newspeak. That's absolute nonsense from its
No, that's not. That is definitely
this toilet's on fire.
You can
and then there's the thing like the law. Well, what does the law say?
The law says,
okay, let's take, for example,
let me tell you,
the New York State Constitution says that human labor is not an article of commerce. You know what that means?
Women.
They can't tax it.
The New York State Public Officer Law, going back to Governor Cuomo and getting him removed, is very clear.
The PBO?
The PBO, yes. Public Officer Law, Section 74-H, which addresses the loss of public confidence and the corruption which Cuomo has done, and which he is responsible for the 16,000 deaths, is a reason to remove him. That is very clear.
Well, I think that's all somewhat irrelevant to the real corruption that's going on. I don't care.
You don't believe 16,000 people being killed and being lied about is real corruption?
Well, okay. I'm coming from the standpoint of somebody who has attained 15 years of clinical experience in a geriatric nursing setting on a clinical campus.
Okay, but I'm asking a very specific question.
I'm letting you know, okay, what my experience is, and it's my experience that nursing homes have always been like that.
I'm
They're
not
horribly understaffed.
I'm not questioning that.
For starters,
I'm not questioning that. That's not the same thing. I'm asking
they're
a very
horribly
specific
understaffed.
question.
I have seen.
I'm not asking about that.
But see, you want to talk about corruption. I'm telling you where it's coming from.
No, I asked a
the
very
fact that it's just become so obvious.
Shauna, I asked a very specific question, and I'm trying to get an answer to that very specific question, not things previous to that, but I'm asking about specifically, do you believe that the nursing home scandal where 16,000 people were killed due to the executive orders of Governor Cuomo is, and then subsequently hidden from the public, is that a crime? Is that a corruption? That is, yes, you agree with that, or no, you don't agree with that?
The whole fact that people let him give those orders and people enforced those orders should tell you, I think should be evidence enough as to where the real problem is. It's those people who just don't question authority. I'm telling you.
But you're not answering my question.
You want to put this all on Cuomo.
At the moment, I'm asking specifically about him.
If he's going to be held liable, then are the ones who enforced those orders, are they going to be held liable too?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
You know? And how much responsible do we, the people, I'm speaking first person, subjective, as one people out of an indefinite number of many people,
there's a very defined
how much
number.
Responsibility do we have for allowing it?
Okay, there is a very defined number of people who are involved in this process. So again, I ask.
Well, maybe that's why it's a pass the buck situation.
But I'm asking you a simple question.
It's a tangled web. Everybody was
Shauna,
just following orders. Who do you point the finger at? I was just doing my job. But see, that's the excuse we always hear, though, Mike. That's the excuse they always give us.
And it wasn't good in the 1940s. It's not good now. That's not an answer. That's not an excuse. That's not a reason to let someone do that. We didn't accept that in the 1940s. I'm not going to accept that now with the government.
Well, maybe we should
held responsible.
Well, maybe we should stop being little pussies and maybe start questioning some authority.
Language on this program, this is not a language where we use that language. Not a program where we use that language. But we've had you on for about 20 minutes. I do want to give other people an opportunity to be able to call in and speak. There are other subjects we want. He's welcome to call in every week. We do it at 2:30 each week. Okay? Okay, I guess that's okay. But I didn't get an answer, and whether Shauna agreed or not, again, we're trying to get to, this isn't about, this ideology is perfect. I'm not trying to dispute that. There are people who love socialism. There are people who love communism. There are people who love capitalism. There are people who love every form of government. I'm not questioning that. What we are talking about are the issues that are affecting us. If you don't agree with the United States government, that's perfectly fine. Best way to do that is to go out, get a petition, get someone elected, and have them change the laws, and to hold the elected officials accountable. That's important. That's important to say. And I believe that, and to say that, well, I'm just following orders is never an acceptable answer for anything. There are laws, and this is something that's in the United States Code of Military Justice. It's taught to members, not only officers, but every single soldier in the military, at least when I was in the service, which is in the 80s and 90s, that you have the right to refuse an illegal order. And that means that you don't get to say that, well, they told me to do it, so I did it. And that doesn't work for police. That doesn't work for military. It doesn't work for anyone. And I don't believe that to say that Governor Cuomo, people who are following him, should they be held accountable? Yes, I believe there should be people held accountable. And like I spoke with Larry earlier, I said, some of these people need to be taken out of office, because that's why we're not talking about 16,000 people who died. We're talking about 7 cases of sexual abuse. Why? Because it protects the rest of the New York State legislature that protected and knew, I believe, and possibly at least some of them knew of the fact that 16,000 people were killed unnecessarily by the Cuomo administration, by the executive emergency powers of Governor Cuomo. And that's important. Now, again, I'm not disputing that. And I don't mind. Anyone can call him on the show. We can talk. And I wanted to give her enough time to try and tie it to what we were speaking about. Shauna didn't. She's always welcome to come back onto the show. But I do want to make sure we're talking about something that makes sense for everyone. And this isn't a platform for just saying, hey, this is my idea. And, it doesn't have anything in connection with what we're speaking about. You may disagree with me on that, but that's why we were having that conversation. So that's just the way I run the show. I try to be fair. I hope Shauna will feel that I was fair. I gave her 20 minutes. So, and I know we lost a few people in here, but that's the risk of doing a live show and taking live real calls and having that open format. And again, you can also call in too at 607-242-1582. And like several people have called in today, and we love that. And you can call in from anywhere in the world. I know some people have trouble from overseas in Germany and UK, Canada, Peru to be able to call in. But if you can, we're always here for you. I personally, and I know Marvin mentions that he loves the Constitution, so do I. And I believe it's a wonderful contract, and I believe it's a wonderful way of running a government. And I disagree, and Mary's right. Everyone has been forced to follow Cuomo's orders, and I think that's wrong. And I think that's why we need to hold him accountable for the corruption that he has committed, because he forced us, because under these emergency executive powers, we allowed him to do that. And I don't think we should ever let anyone get away with that again. No one should be able to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I want to bring up the insurrection, which is the definition, again, is an act or instance of revolting against civil authority or an established government. And that flies in the face. And this is something we've been talking about with the BLM protests. And we asked the question back on December 15th, will riots and unrest end with President-elect Biden? Because we were given the impression, the statement, the understanding that it's all going to end. That it was all about Orange Man bad. It was all about the people who had the wrong think. And if we get the people with right think in charge, well, it's all going to end. And that this was only because of the failure of people to understand that our government is corrupt and wrong. Except that's not true. Because here we go. This is a video that many people may have seen, but most people did not see, which is that there is an autonomous zone at the George Floyd Memorial. This has existed from 2020, from back in June of 2020. And it continues to exist today. And this is, as you can see here, and all the links will be in the description afterwards, where you can see these are individuals who are threatening an assault against a member of the press, who have refused to allow the police in to this zone, with all those homes, all those individuals, whether they agree or not, are being held accountable. They are basically kidnapped. And this is an area that has denied the powers of the election, the laws and legislation that we all live by. And that's okay. Democrats have no problem with that. Rather, progressives have no problem with that. The socialists have no problem with that, because there is a political agenda they want to achieve. That is a problem. That is a massive problem. You want to talk about insurrection? This caused a man to die. And we know that this is something that the government of Minneapolis and the government of Minnesota is allowing to happen, because they've already told us in February that they're going to reclaim this territory, this part of the United States, after a trial happens. But in the meantime, people are subject to a military style group that is occupying an actual occupied force in Minneapolis. where they will not allow police to go in, and a man died just last week because of it. And you know what? Besides the fact that this is being supported by organizations in Washington, D.C., and has been linked to an organization with George Soros, the fact is that according to the reporting, we've seen that the result of all this is a 250% increase in gunshot victims. People are dying. People are being killed. People are being attacked. They are being harmed. And you may say to me, well, Mike, what does that got to do with what we were talking about with Governor Cuomo? What does that got to do with removing Governor Cuomo? What does that have to do with the fact that there's corruption? Because it's the same corruption. If we allow one form of the corruption to exist, all forms of the corruption continue to grow. The reason why we see that Donald Lapardo, and I know some people have mentioned it in the comments, have said that we have has refused to say anything about Governor Cuomo, and why we're talking about the sexual assaults and not the 16,000 people that died is the same reason that we're seeing that there is an autonomous zone in Minneapolis right now. People are using this to take advantage of the American people. They're using emotions to get power, and they are using that power to nullify your rights, to nullify your ability to live your life. And that is a massive problem. And they are connected. They are absolutely connected. And you're not hearing about this in the major news media. You're not seeing this autonomous zone. I don't know how many people who are watching this have ever heard that there was a George Floyd autonomous zone in Minneapolis. And that there have been people who have died because of that area. And that people are being held against their will within that zone, and that people are terrified to go in there. This is like talking about Mogadishu in the United States. And this has got to be terrifying. This is horrible. And if we can't speak about that, and I see that YouTube, Facebook, Twitter don't like me talking about this, but if we're not willing to talk about that and that fact that that is an insurrection, that is insurrection. It is both a violent and purposive, willful of disregard to our laws and our nation. And if that insurrection is okay, then how can we be surprised when we have a governor who says, I won't resign, and who is responsible for 16,000 deaths? They are connected. But maybe I misunderstand, and maybe, as Jesse's pointing out, the media has told us this is mostly peaceful. It's a summer of love. It's a winter of love. It is just love all over the place. Because we know that Governor Cuomo is definitely trying to spread his love all over the place. And I want to go back to some of the comments here. Larry had mentioned that Assemblywoman Donald Lapardo was silent until it was given okay to say something. And I have called her out on this program before, because Assemblywoman Donald Lapardo was part of the New York State Legislature that remained absolutely silent until there were at least 5 claims of sexual assault against Governor Cuomo. And only at that point did they say, me too, believe all women, and maybe we should take away some of his emergency powers, not willing to say he should resign and or be forced out under violation of the law, Public Officer Law, Section 74-H, as I mentioned before. And that, just Larry mentions, is cowardly, and I would say, yeah, it probably is, because that's going with partisanship over the public. It is a violation of the oath of office, and that is a problem. Star Raptor Flock mentions that, what were the emergency powers called? They were the emergency powers of Governor Cuomo. It's COVID powers. Emergency, I think it was emergency orders due to pandemic, I believe was the term there, but it was an enactment of emergency executive powers. And we're seeing that with this, we are seeing this in many states. Like I said earlier, this is happening in Michigan with Governor Whitmer. We're seeing this in California with Governor Newsom. We're seeing it in Pennsylvania with Governor Wolf. This is something that is happening across our country, where we are seeing an overreach of power by politicians for political gain. Over and over again, the more we pay attention to the details and the more the news is coming out and the more we ask questions, we get the same thing. This is all being done, whether it's COVID, whether it's the overreach of Governor Cuomo. It's all about power, and it's about you not having a voice consistently. Art Garrison, hey Art. It's really great to see you. Thank you for watching the show. We knew from the jump that the most vulnerable people to COVID were the elderly in the nursing homes. The first cluster of deaths in the United States were in a nursing home in Washington. That's correct. If I remember correctly, it was the first 23 people that died in the United States in March was in Washington State in a nursing home. That was the very first time that we found out about COVID and that it had come over from China. Marvin McKinney mentions HR 1 is a license to steal elections, and I agree with you, Marvin. It absolutely is. It is disempowering. It nullifies votes, and that is terrifying. Star Raptor Flock mentions that the George Floyd Autonomous Zone is certainly more successful than the Chaz, which was in Seattle, the Seattle Autonomous Zone. And unlike Chaz, they got $500,000, which is terrifying. That is insurrection being paid for. Did we not hear all of the Democrats screaming at the top of their lungs throughout the month of end of January and February, talking about autonomous zones? They were talking about insurrection and how this money was being funneled, and this is about terrorism. How is it not terrorizing when my neighborhood has been taken over by a group of individuals that they were not elected. They just did so because they had a bunch of power, and they took over an area and said, you have to do what we want now, or else. You're going to be there and under my thumb until someone does what I say. We're holding you hostage. And this is part of their hostage negotiation. Yes, BLM, it's a hostage negotiation. And that is an insurrection. And it has led directly to the deaths of a dozen throughout the entire summer of 2020. Star Raptor Flock says they throw the 93% peaceful number as if the 7% is nothing. You know what? If anything is mostly peaceful, that means it is at least partially violent. And that is a problem. And we need to call it out for exactly what it is. It is violence. It is a movement that is using force to cause others to submit against their will. We don't accept that in other countries. We're fighting. We have troops in Syria right now that are fighting another country's civil war because of that same reason. That's why we're in the Middle East. And we're allowing that to be in the United States? That's insane. Jesse mentions that he met Newsom in 2001 and didn't like him. I can understand that. And wow, they really don't like us talking about this. They really are trying to throttle us right this second. But I did want to talk about that. And I think that's an important thing. And whether you agree with the concept of BLM, the concept that all lives matter, and I do mean all lives, I'm not going to specify, well, these people with this tone of skin and these people with that tone of skin, well, there's a difference. And like Coca-Cola, some people need to be less white. Well, does that mean some other people need to be less black? Does it mean someone has to be less Asian or Hispanic? Do some people have to be less Jewish or less Muslim? Where do you end that process? This is insanity, and it is detrimental. It is a means of destroying our nation, and we should all be very upset about that. Massively upset about that. At least, in my opinion, I believe that's the case. You may disagree. You may say, Mike, you don't get it. But I can tell you, I don't get it. That anyone can say, I have an autonomous zone in the United States, that we're not going to follow the Constitution. You don't have a right to free speech. You don't have a right to defend yourself. You don't have the right to privacy. You don't have the right to not be punished for a crime that didn't exist. When you don't have that, that's the autonomous zone in a nutshell. And they're doing that because, well, someone else didn't do what we wanted them to do. I'm sorry. That's not America. That's not how it works. It is somewhat socialist. It is definitely authoritarian, and it is absolutely a problem. And we should call it out, because that is a form of corruption. That is a corruption of our Constitution. It is a corruption of our individuality. It is a corruption of law and the social contract. It is a corruption of our ability to live lives without someone beating us over the head saying, do what I say right now, or else. And I think the news media need to talk about this more. I think it's a very important thing. Now, there was something else I wanted to get to. I've talked about it before, the pregnant women in the military, and I do want to address that before the end of the show, because I think it's important, because it also follows along with the same idea. And that is that we've seen that there is a progressive pack out there. They're putting a hit out on Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is being called a traitor because he doesn't want pregnant women to fight in the U.S. military, and because he's anti-women, supposedly, that he's anti-women in the military. He's anti-women on the front lines or something like that. Here is exactly what he said that is so troubling to some people, the progressives, not the Democrats. Again, there's a difference between Democrats, liberals, and progressives. The progressives are upset about this. And here's what he had to say.
Last year, we learned that China has quickly developed the world's largest naval force. In 2015, China had 255 battle force ships. Now they have more than 360. And many of those ships are more capable than anything in the American naval fleet. So how are we responding to this? Well, at the White House yesterday, Joe Biden addressed it effectively. What's the American military's response? Here's what Joe Biden said.
Some of it's relatively straightforward work, where we're making good progress designing body armor that fits women properly, tailoring combat uniforms for women, creating maternity flight suits, updating requirements for their hairstyles.
Wait for it.
And some of it is going to take...
Hey, I don't know.
Oh, I hate commercials. Okay, I'm not going to go to the commercial, but essentially that was the whole point. That we see that Joe Biden says, hey, we're going to... It's the same thing with white privilege. Now it's male privilege, toxic masculinity. All men are in the military. So we have to have more women in the military. We have to make sure women stay in the military. We have to have transgenders in the military. And they're all going to have separate rules. And we're going to tailor, special made the military for those special interest groups. That's not how a military works. That's not how an effective military works. That's not how you protect people. You don't go and say, well, we're going to have maternity flight suits. Can you understand that? Maternity flight suits. Why is a pregnant woman in a jet or a plane in a war zone? That's what the military is for, to fight wars. And we're going to have them flying around in maternity, 9 months pregnant. Do you want a woman 9 months pregnant in a fighter jet fighting it with 2, 3, 6 Gs fighting? Is that really what you want? Does that make any sense? And yet there are people who are upset about this, who are very upset about this. You know who those people were? The Marine Corps. The Marine Corps came out and said what it looks like in today's armed forces to Tucker Carlson. Get it right before you get left, boomer. This is absolutely insane. There is an absolutely legitimate question to make to the Marine Corps, which I am a Marine, and to say to the Marine Corps, hang on, we need people who are in peak physical condition that are capable of handling the mission. And pregnant women really aren't the top of the list on peak physical condition to fight a war. That is what the Marine Corps is. Every single Marine is, by definition, a basic rifleman. Your job is to pick up a rifle and fight the enemy, no matter what everything else is. This is the Marine Corps. In the Army, you can be whatever kind of technician doing whatever. Marine Corps is there to fight. That is it. You're there to fight the enemy. And at the most base level, pick up a rifle, go fight the enemy. That's what everyone in the Marine Corps is expected to do, at least when I was in service from the 80s and through the 90s. And now we're having someone, and here's the other thing. This is the Marine Corps attacking private citizens. We have gone that far in our government. This is how far the corruption has gone. We have gone so far in this corruption that we have our military taking on a partisan political idea, a fringe partisan political idea against the American people on a legitimate question. The question I would ask, and that stuck out of me in that phrase, forget about the hairstyles, I don't care. You know what? I can't wear a mustache or this beard in the military, and I shouldn't. That's just the way it goes. It's not about having freedom. You joined the military. You're not under the Constitution. That's why we have a UCMJ, Unified Code of Military Justice. And you have certain expectations against you. A woman who is pregnant is not necessarily going to fit that bill. I'm not saying women aren't capable. I'm not saying women can't be in the military. I'm not saying they can't fight in wars. Those are entirely different questions. But I do have a problem when I have a woman in a maternity pregnancy flight suit. There is an inherent problem there. And the answer from the Marine Corps, which is based on going out and killing people, that is their job. Let's be honest. That's what the Marines are there for. That is their mission statement, to find the enemy and through superior firepower to remove their willingness and ability to continue to fight. That is the mission of the Marine Corps. And you want to tell me that when someone says this doesn't fit the mission of the Marine Corps, therefore it shouldn't be in the Marine Corps, and the answer is get right before you get left, boomer? Besides that being some kind of idiot text speech of the youngest generation in America at this time, I expect that from a 6-year-old, that's coming from the official United States Marine Corps. That's a problem. And when I see something like this being said, attacking a United States citizen who has the freedom of speech that they are there to defend, when that is their comment, I am then not surprised when we find out that we have an autonomous zone, George Floyd, where we have people who are flaunting the laws and holding other American citizens as prisoner, and that they are using their force to try and drive away the news media whose job is to tell the public. This is corruption. This is a corruption of our society. Is it the same kind of corruption that leads us to say that Cuomo must go? Is it the same kind of corruption that killed 16,000 people? And in my mind, yes, it is. Because all of these things are corruptions of our contract, of our Constitution, of our rights as individuals, and that is a problem. Let me go to the comments. Mike mentions that I like to add, Mike Coletti mentions that I like to add the whole white privilege thing is, it's stupid. He says it's old. I say it's stupid. It should never have existed. I don't hold people by the color of their skin. I don't judge people by the color of their skin. And don't you dare ever judge me by the color of my skin. You can love me, hate me, think I'm smart or dumb, but don't you ever question and presume something like that based on the fact that I have a certain skin tone. That doesn't mean I am or am not capable of anything. That's just the way I was born, and I don't have to pay $3,000 on a vacation to get a suntan. Okay, but that doesn't make me a good or bad person, and it has nothing to do with how I live my life or anyone, and we should never hold anyone to that. And that's why I'm upset with Coca-Cola and other groups like that. Tony replying that he hasn't found any privilege. Jesse mentions that I've heard of white privilege. I knew people with sweaters. Okay. Star Raptor mentions that I swear it's like saying that not wanting to have a guy with no legs in the military is anti-handicapped. It's very much like that. This is ridiculous. No one, the military is a very specific purpose, and anything that doesn't fit that purpose is not necessary. It is not a social experiment. The military isn't there to see, let's see what happens. Oh, let's try this idea. That's not what the military is there for. And no, not everyone can be a Marine. And you know what? If you don't like that, if you're offended by that, I don't care. There's a reason the Marine Corps has about 250,000 people at the most, almost at any time, except in the middle of an exact war. And even then, we're still selective. There is a reason for that. There is a purpose for that. The military has a very strict purpose. And when you deviate from that, you destroy its ability to do what it's there to do. And the only reason, well, one of the only reasons that we have a government is to protect the people who cannot protect themselves. That is what the military is there for, to protect our freedoms and our country and our nation. Whether you love it or you don't, it's there to protect you, because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have any of these freedoms. You would not have the First Amendment. You would not have a Second, Fourth, Third, any amendment. You would have no freedom whatsoever. You would have China telling you what you can do, telling you how much food you can have, telling you that you get to have 1 pound of pork for a month. And by the way, if you don't like that, well, you can just eat rice, because that's the only food you get. That you can only have 1 kid, and you better have a boy and not a girl, because that's the government has a preference on that, and that you can't speak out. This is all connected, folks. It's not one or the other. It's all of them together. You want to join my Marine Corps? Fantastic. Do what I did when I joined the Marine Corps. Go through boot camp. Go through the same boot camp with the same rules and same regulations that I had to, with the same objectives and the same goals. You do that, you're in the Marine Corps. Fantastic. Let's go out. Here's a rifle. Join me on the battlefield. We can go and do that. If you can't do that, get out of my Marine Corps. Maybe there's a spot for you in the Army. And if not, okay, go live your life as a civilian. I'm sorry you can't live to your dreams. Everyone doesn't get their dreams. That's just life. I'm not a billionaire. I would like to be a billionaire. I'm not. I would like to be covered on national news. I'm not. I would like to be in an elected office. I'm not. You know what? My life goes on. You do without. That's just how it is. You don't have to agree with me, but I want to make sure we get this out there, because it needs to be said. Because far too often, this is hidden, and people are told, oh, you can't say that because someone might be offended. So what? You know what? I'm offended by BLM. Does that mean they have to shut down? No. Well, guess what? You get to hear this too. And let's deal with this. If you don't agree with it, I don't care how you emotionally feel. Am I factually incorrect? Is what I have said factually incorrect? You don't have to like it, but can you tell me where it's factually wrong? Because I don't believe it is. And because I don't believe there is a factual error in what I've said, then that is a corruption of our society to make us feel bad and to hold others accountable for something they didn't do wrong. And that corruption then allows certain elected officials to gain power and to abuse that power. like we see with Governor Cuomo, as well as Governor Newsom, Governor Whitmer, and many others. Let me get back to the comments. Michael Coletti, he says, you're absolutely right on the military, Mike. Mike Coletti goes on, can you imagine a pregnant woman being captured by the enemy behind enemy lines? I don't want to ever have to face that thought. I don't ever want to have to consider that idea. People may disagree. People may have all kinds of opinions, but there should never be that image in your mind. I would never want to see that happen, especially with what we see other countries do. Look at what they do. They stone people to death in the Middle East because a woman got raped. They stone her to death. They stone people to death for being gay. And you're telling me you want to see what happens to a pregnant woman because she was in the military fighting and those same savages that behead people got a hold of her? Do you really want to see that? I don't. Not ever. What about hijabs or turbans? No. We don't wear, you know what? People who are Hindu don't get to wear their head wraps either. It's a military. There's a reason why we do things uniformly. Not only for the uniformity of the people in the military and the uniformity of the orders that go out, but also because it's the fact that you don't. Michael Coletti mentions great topics you're touching on today. I think we've had a great show today. I think we've covered so much ground. Tony mentions the Army. Mike, send them to the Coast Guard. You know what? By the way, Tony, the Coast Guard, I have a lot of respect for the Coast Guard. A lot of respect for the Coast Guard. Because the Coast Guard, they get trained the way Marines used to get trained. Because everyone's so focused on the Marine Corps, what happens at Paris Island or at Camp Hollywood. And so many people are focused on what's going on there and trying to make sure that moms of America don't have to worry about their kids at night because no one's beating your kid over the head to make sure that he duck walks properly. But in the Coast Guard, at least in the 90s, they could still get away with that. They could still make you do duck walks and hit you over the head with a rubber hose. They could still get away with that. And that's a good thing. Now, I know there will be people who are going to say, Mike, that is barbaric. That is horrible. Why should anyone beat over the head? Because it's training you for war. What, do you think that ISIS, the Islamic terrorists, that they're going to be kind and gentle to you? Do you think they're just going to go, oh, well, you know, his mom wouldn't like us to beat him to death? Are you kidding me? That's what these people do. And you want someone to be trained kinder and gentler? Got to worry about their feelings? I don't care about your feelings when I'm in a foxhole with a rifle and being fired upon by the enemy. Go watch 13 Hours, by the way. Tell me at any moment where you think that somebody cared about anyone else's feelings in there. Which that movie, 13 Hours, is a rendition of what happened in Benghazi when 4 Americans were killed, including one of our ambassadors, where we had insurgents come out and tried to kill Americans because they're Americans. The same thing that the Ayatollah in Iran has been promising for most of my lifetime, to kill every American, whether they're a socialist, a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, a libertarian. They want them all dead. And they are not going to be nice enough to do that only on the days that, Monday through Friday, only from 9 to 5. And, they're going to do it in the most humane way possible. That's not what war is. That's not what they do. And that's not the purpose of the military. So if you want to go out and have pregnant women fighting a war, please don't do it in my country. I want the other guy to do that. I want the bad guys to do that because we can survive better. But yet we have people who are saying, well, this is absolutely insane. You can't do this. We have people in the Marine Corps, who also followed this up by saying, come back when you served and been pregnant. Well, first of all, I have served. And second of all, no one in the Marine Corps should be pregnant. You can be a woman all you want. You can be trans. I don't care. You know what? If you can go through Paris Island like I did, and if you can serve and meet the requirements of being a Marine like I did, then you can serve. And if you cannot do that, at any point, you get out of the service, period. It is very simple, because when you start making special rules for special people in special groups, you're no longer talking about a military, you're talking about the Girl Scouts. And I don't want the Girl Scouts in a foxhole with me trying to face off the enemy, where I have to try and figure out, well, right now she's in her 3rd trimester, she's getting morning sickness, and I got a guy with an RPG trying to shoot me dead. Gee, that's not a moment I want to have. Not for them, not for me. Because all that means is people are going to die badly and unnecessarily. Is that difficult to understand? And meanwhile, we have people who are attacking Tucker Carlson. And one of those individuals who is attacking Tucker Carlson is Tammy Duckworth. Tammy Duckworth is, and I'm trying to find where I had that quote from her, because she's one of the people who decided that she's upset with I don't recall, but Tammy Duckworth, who is a senator, who is very upset with Tucker Carlson and thinks that this is absolutely insane, that this is wrong, that you can't be upset with having maternity, military personnel who are pregnant in maternity flight suits. She thinks that it's perfectly okay, that it's perfectly fine. Tammy Duckworth thinks that it's sexist to say that we shouldn't let anyone do that. And I have to say to Tammy Duckworth and to the others that are out there, and matter of fact, here it is. Tammy Duckworth says, F. Tucker Carlson, while he was practicing his two-step, America's female warriors were hunting down Al-Qaeda and proving the strength of America's women. Happy belated International Women's Day to everyone but Tucker, who even I can dance better than. First of all, Senator Duckworth, I don't care if you can dance. I don't care. I know her legs got blown off. I don't care. We don't care about how you dance. When you were in the military, we cared that you can complete the mission. But since you have no legs, why don't you go back in? Because you can't complete the mission. That's why your tour ended. And you rightly deserve to be praised for the efforts you did at the time. But you don't make the standard now, so you don't go on continuing fighting. And I can accept that, and I respect that. And I wouldn't expect you to do otherwise. And it was a choice. Senator Duckworth, you chose. You made a voluntary choice to join the military. Others did not. I respect when people don't. They don't have to. It's called America. It's not called the Soviet Union. You're not inducted into the military. This isn't North Korea where you're required to do that. Otherwise, you're going to starve to death or your family is going to be harmed. And she may not like the fact that Tucker Carlson's going to say pregnant women shouldn't be flying fighter jets or involved in combat. And that we shouldn't change our military based around some social experiment from some professor sitting in a college who has never been in a foxhole and actually hates our military, so they don't care if it fails. They want it to fail. But maybe people don't agree with me. Maybe someone says, well, Mike, the military, it's just bad. Fantastic. Name me a country that doesn't have a military, or isn't a military, or is not a country that has some other country providing military for them. The United States takes care of, say, Japan as an example. Our military protects them. Our military protects Germany as an example. But those countries have militaries of their own too. Name one country that doesn't. Because if you think it's what I'm talking about is terrible and military has no place, Please tell me, where is there anywhere where they aren't? Because if you have a place like that, guess what? It's been taken over by someone else. And the only way to preserve our rights and freedoms, and more importantly, our resources. You know what? At the end of the day, China, they want to take over America, not because they want you to be socialists. They want our oil. They want our resources, our oil, our wind, our water. They want to use our coal, our minerals. And the only thing that stops them from doing that is that we have a military that is large enough to hold them back. Although their military is growing and ours is shrinking under Obama and again under Biden. That should concern you. Because again, that is a corruption of our military. Today we've been talking about corruption. Corruption of individuals, corruptions of states, corruptions of our government, our constitution, corruption of our military. And this should be eye-opening. It should be terrifying. It should be upsetting for people. And you may not agree with me. And that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. If you think it's a good idea for the United States military to make a special rule and special opportunities for pregnant women to fight, please explain that logic to me. I want to hear it. I really do. If you believe that we should make special rules and that we should enable people to change genders on the public dime, your pocket, your money in your pocket, distracting from our mission of the military, which should only be to protect America and its interests, period. That's it. Anything beyond that, the military has no purpose doing. And if you think we should spend our time and our money doing transgender instead of trying to do that, please explain to me why. Please tell me how that's going to protect us from North Korea, from Iran, from China. Please explain that to me. How is it that, because I can tell you, by corrupting our military and making it some kind of day camp, we're going to create more opportunities for autonomous zones from the left and possibly from the right, but definitely from the left because they're doing it, where pockets of groups are going to take over and say, oh, no, we're not following your laws anymore. We're going to do our own thing. And if someone doesn't agree, well, we got the guns, we've got the military, we've got the numbers, and that's it. And by the way, that governor you have, they agree with us. They're letting us do this. They're supporting us in doing this. And by the way, the reason why they're doing that is because we know how many people they sexually assaulted, how many times they've been to Epstein's Island, and how much money they stole from the public, because they're corrupt as hell. Corruption is a problem, and it takes place on many levels in many parts of the world. And that corruption creates more corruption. As I showed you on the show today, we were talking about it. It's in Scotland. We're talking about North Korea. We're talking about Iran. We're talking about the Soviet Union. We're talking about what's going on in Britain. We're talking about what's happening in the world, down in South America, in Venezuela, in Bolivia. We're talking about it in the United States. Corruption in one place spreads to another. Corruption of one idea leads to corruption of other ideas. And it feels overwhelming. It really does. But it isn't. Or at least it doesn't have to be. Because we can stop it. And I know this is the end of the show, and a lot of people may have gone, people may not have paid attention, but I want to make sure I say this for those who are still with me all the way through this. Oh, no. How you doing? Thank you for calling the show. Please hold on one second. I just want to finish this one thought. Corruption can be stopped by you in America because you have free speech and you have a right to vote. And the more you use that, the more you will prevent the corruption we've been talking about. Thank you for calling the show. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I'm your host, Michael Voss. Whom am I speaking to?
Hey, Mike, it's Jason.
Hey, Jason. You called me just as we're ending the show. Go ahead. We got about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. So I don't know how lagged out you are, but you know, I was going to talk a little about the situation with you know, the pregnant women in the military.
Yeah, no, I just finished on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, there's this. It's really one of those things is where it seems like, well, we know that the Biden administration is constantly focused on, and it's all these, you know, social justice tasks, and every single one of these policies, you know, benefits our enemies. I mean, China is cleaning our clock on everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the situation is really getting bad as far as you know, their overall power. I mean, the one little clip there you had with Tucker Carlson, he you know, was pointing out is like, look at the oceans now are being ruled by China, you know.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about? We're talking about pregnant women now. And you
pregnant
know,
women in flight suits.
Yeah,
it's
and
ridiculous.
I mean, just like because they want to make more comfortable uniforms because that's the biggest priority. Yeah, and the irony is where the uniform is going to be made. What, China? I mean, that was a huge thing that was being pushed during the pandemic, which we haven't heard anything of. Is just that we were going to start putting efforts to actually increase our manufacturing of these vital, you know, necessities that are just were not being able to be manufactured in the United States. So when our supply chains were getting destroyed, and we had to look for China for everything, during that period of time, all the Democrats and everybody, you know, was saying, hey, you know what we got to do? We got to make sure that we have, you know, strong manufacturing in the United States. And, you know, now we're looking at flight suits, you know. It's just it's extremely frustrating. I mean, the fact is, too, is that you got you know, the situation is I can't imagine like the military now is that I don't know who's running their social media because now that they've gone just as woke as Coca-Cola, and I mean at that point you got to be thinking, oh geez, we're really doomed if that's the case. Or either they're thinking maybe it's their new recruiting campaign needs to, you know, embrace that, you know, woke because they just can't get anybody to come out to it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, so if they're trying to push an appeal like for a recruitment, you know, to be more open and more accepting to women who decide to get pregnant while they're actually serving in the military, that gives them what, greater peace of mind, greater comfort that they will be able to keep their position somehow. I mean, I just can't imagine it. It's some of the things though you think about if you're trying to recruit individuals who are going to go out into the military and they want to know that they're going to be able to complete a task and be safe doing it. Meanwhile, the military is so focused now on the social justice aspect. It's like any of the good guys, any of the people who are logical and who really believe in fighting for the country, I mean, those ones there are now going to be the ones who you want, but they're going to be now more apt to second guess actually entering into that, saying, well, look, I'm like, you went woke. It's like, you know, maybe I'll find something in the private sector, you know, before joining the military. I mean, that's just it's so detrimental. You know, but you see this in all sectors. You look at our military, you look at our police. The police have the exact same problem because the thing is we're going down the social justice, you know, route. And not only that though, is that I mean, and
no one wants to be in there. In Minneapolis, as an example, there's 200 less police officers than they need. And you know what that means? That you have more people who have less access to the police. They have more, they're losing more time on 911 calls. More people are being harmed and injured, and crime is going more rampant because there's less police. Yeah. And meanwhile, we're hearing the progressives say, oh, that's wonderful. Don't you want that for everyone? No.
Yeah, and you know, Mike, you know how much more danger that puts those officers in? Because the thing is that you have a lack of staff. That means that generally if you have domestic incidents or things that are extremely violent, like the incidents that they're always saying, oh, we need more mental health workers, we need more support here, we need more support there. Well, the thing is that those things require at least, you know, 2 officers to show up, you know, at those calls. Yeah. And the thing is that guess what? They just don't have the staff to do it. That means that you have one individual going into these circumstances. And the thing is that the ability to de-escalate a situation before actually having to resort to using, you know, either, you know, a firearm, it's going to be more difficult because if you can't handle call as an individual, then what's going to happen is that you're going to end up probably resorting to using, deadly physical force a lot sooner than you would if you actually had that support system, and then in Minneapolis and in these, progressive areas where they're defunding their police the way that they've always wanted to, it makes it far more dangerous, and there will be more shooting incidents and more, violence because of it. But then again, it will carry further into their narrative saying, well, we got to do even better and defund even more. But I don't know. It's insane. If our enemies are looking at us and saying, geez, we're doing a great job, destroying our country, on our own.
We really are. And the problem is that a lot of people don't realize that this is all connected. This is a corruption. And when we talk about corruption, people don't understand that we're losing our fabric as Americans, as a society, as a country. And these things all add up. If you lose your police, you lose the society. You gain chaos. People aren't just naturally. There are people out there who just aren't naturally nice. They're called criminals. Some of them are the criminally insane. They will harm you. And even laws that we have already. And I did want to talk about some of the gun laws. I'll talk about that later in a separate video. But they're not protecting the laws. The police, they don't stop these criminals from going out and killing people. So why would we want to encourage them by saying, let's have less of that? How about the crazies that are overseas, like the international terrorists that are sponsored by Iran? What about those guys that are willing to blow up babies? They're not going to get stopped because you go, well, we're going to be nice, and we don't want to have a mean police, a mean military. They're not going to shoot at you. They're going to hold up a flag and say, red card, you can't do that. Are you kidding me? I don't know.
Our enemies love this, because it's always about, okay, if we put our gun down, then they're going to put it down, If we show up, if we send our police over to, an incident where there was a domestic or a shooting or a stabbing or something like that, and, we have our police go in there unarmed, then it won't escalate into a shooting, and nobody will die.
That's crazy. You know what?
The insanity is there. That's what they believe, though.
You know, remember when I did, I'll include this in the links on the show. It was Richard Munoz out of Lancaster, PA. That man burst out of his door. The officer walked up to the door, and within 4 seconds, there was that man had died. And why did he die? Because he charged after a police officer, chasing down the police officer with a butcher's knife in his hand, trying to kill him. And you want to tell me that you want to have a social worker deal within 4 seconds with no words being said, and the only thing happening is that this man who is mentally unstable is charging at you with a knife. You want to tell me that you're going to talk him down? No, you're not. The only thing that saved that officer's life is that he shot him. And sadly, because he shot him, that man died. But that was all a consequence of what Richard Munoz did. Ricardo Munoz. What he did. And that is, he tried to kill someone. He didn't have a regard for human life. And we see that a lot. Police, it's amazing. People make it seem like police are running around headhunting black people. They're not. You're talking about 39 people in 2 years' time. You're talking about the number of times that police actually draw their gun based on a Harvard study of this, 900,000 interactions with the public per day across the entire nation is about 0.001%. We have to understand this as a reality. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And, it's crazy. That one incident you're talking about where the guy comes running out with the knife and gets shot. It's amazing, though.
I did a whole video on that.
No, you did it. And, the thing is, though, is I've heard a lot of commentary. And the thing is that the Monday morning quarterbackers, we're all saying this, the people were mild. They were like, well, you know what? They didn't need to shoot, they could have, maybe just shot him in the leg or something like that. I'm like, okay, you have absolutely no idea how to deal with that circumstance, you know? Or somebody was saying, oh, well, what if they had a taser or something like that? I'm like, again, you have no clue what the hell you're talking about, you know? And there's a disconnect there. And I think one of the hardest things about our, you know, the perception, I think, with law enforcement that I think people really need to pound through their head is the fact that, you know, police are doing a job that we're paying them to do, you know, and they're working for us, you know, they're enforcing our laws, they're keeping us safe, you know, and you know, you've got to give them the tools so they can complete the job. And the thing is that, you know, the constant analyzing every little incremental, you know, thing that they do, it's only the cases, the handful, a very few cases that go national. They want to change the entire policies of every single police department, which what does it do? Absolutely nothing, you know, positive. Generally, it's just a lot of times it's just a waste of money. I mean, look at what's going on when Cuomo, he decided to go and tell all our police departments in New York State that they had to come up with some sort of plan. I don't know if it's due in April or something. And when you analyze what they're doing, a lot of these police departments are throwing money, you know, into areas that they've already have a lot invested into. And in certain areas, it looks like what they're doing too is they're trying to come up with different plans so they can basically get it funded by the state. So essentially, though, it's a waste of money, and it's a virtue signaling, you know.
Yeah. Well, let me show you, because I found it, and I want to share this with everyone so they can see it. This is from our coverage on September 14th of 2020 with Ricardo Munoz out of Lancaster, PA. And this is a specific clip, and I want you to watch this for a second. I know you can't see it right now, Jason. You're on the phone with me, but
I've seen it.
Seconds. I'm going to show you exactly what happened on the body cam so that you can see what's going on and what they are rioting in Lancaster about. So let's go right to the video. This is from the body cam unedited video.
20 is coming your way. Where'd he go?
And it should be any second.
Get back, get back.
Four seconds. 4 seconds, folks. That was 4 seconds. And Jason, I know you couldn't see that, but you've seen the video before.
Yeah, I've seen it. I mean,
and that's where they're saying, oh, no. The right answer is what we need to do is get a social worker in there. We need someone who's unarmed, who's not the police, who can go up to that door like this officer did and have this guy burst out with a knife and try and kill you.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard things too. They said, well, you know, at least maybe you should just give the social workers tasers, you know. And let me just say one thing about tasers is that when you look at like the main incidents and the problems that have happened where deadly physical force generally escalated to be used, it was actually a failure of the tasers. Like if you look at the situation that happened up in Rochester there where the guy went for the knife inside his vehicle where he had one on him and he was shot in the back, you know, I don't know.
That wasn't in Rochester. That was over in Kenosha.
Oh, that was Kenosha where he shot in the...
That was Jacob Blake, where he was shot with the taser and he was holding a knife in his hand, as he has himself since admitted in interviews. He had a knife in his hand. He had fought with the police. They tased him. He shrugged off the taser, walked over and went around the other side of a car to go and get a God knows only what. He was going inside the car, and he got shot 7 times by officers who didn't know what this man was thinking, and he had already been tased.
Yeah,
and it's not the only case. There's been many videos of many times tasers fail.
Yeah, well, you look at the other incident there where the guy grabbed the taser and went around and pointed it at it, and he was shot because of it. Again, that was in
Atlanta. That was in Atlanta, which led to an attempt to create a autonomous zone in Atlanta. They burned down a Wendy's, and that resulted in the death of a 6-year-old child. A 6-year-old child was killed in Atlanta because of Rashard Brooks fighting with police, wrongfully fighting with police, and he had a taser in his hand because the taser didn't work. Yes.
Yeah, it failed, you know, and I believe there was another incident too, but I can't recall right off the top of my head. But it's a sad thing, because the thing is that they're trying to do what I mean, that's the protocol, though. You know, they go up the continuum, you know, so they're going to use the least amount of physical force possible. But the problem is that when the taser doesn't work and you're at that point, the question I always would ask is that should they have used more physical, you know, hands on it when you have two people there? Would that have stopped it? And the thing is, though, is like I said, people are looking at those devices to give, you know, social workers and healthcare workers and have them actually go in the field and use that to protect themselves. And I'm just like, no, you're just nuts.
Yeah. Well, I know some people don't agree. Some people don't like the police. They don't believe the police follow the law. But I believe that overwhelmingly they do. And they do a very good job. And if anything, I personally would say, let's fund the police more. And I don't want to see a reduction in the police forces. I don't want to see more social workers trying to do policing. I don't agree with that. Other people may think something else. I know there's a comment on the video right now. Someone said that they don't agree. That's okay. You don't have to. But I tell you what, you're not going to have the criminals with an intent to harm and the criminally insane. They're not going to be stopped because you say, well, I'm a nice person and everyone should be nice, or that everyone has the freedom to do what they want to do. That's not going to stop those people from doing the wrong thing. And that's something we need to recognize. You want to train the police to be better? That's one thing. But if you're trying to train them not to do their job and you're trying to get rid of them, you're only inviting more trouble. That's my belief.
And, you know, it's interesting, too, is that when you listen to the commentary, you know, because I've been following in New York State, you know, some of the, you know, the people, how they talk about mental health workers and how they can de-escalate a situation. I mean, it is kind of hilarious in certain ways that they think that all of a sudden somebody with certain training or with a certain title can simply walk into their room, wave their hand, and then spontaneously get an individual who's, you know, critically at the point of a breakdown, just to go to instant, you know, compliance. You know, I mean, they literally think
it's the same people. It's the same people who think that a pregnant woman should be in a flight suit in a jet and fighting in a war. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work like that. They have no concept of reality, in my opinion.
Well, I know. I think they've been watching too much Star Wars. They just think the guy can wave his hands and instant compliance, you know?
Well, not Star Wars. Let's be accurate. The Last Jedi.
Oh, yeah.
there is a big difference. Yeah. But we've been on 2.5 hours now. My voice is starting to go a little bit. And I think it was a great addition. Thank you for giving me a chance to bring up that Ricardo Munoz and to speak about this subject in general. Really enjoyed that call. Yeah, lots of interaction. I love that. And not everyone agreed, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it was great to have the conversation. So what I want to do is I want to thank you. I'm going to end the show. I think it was a great way to end the show. And folks, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you are always invited back from everywhere in the world to join us with this. Jason, I want to thank you for your call. Oh, I think he already left. And you too can come in every week like we did with Shauna, with Larry, with Jesse and Jason. You can call in too and have your voice and talk about the issues that matter to you, the issues that we need to talk about, and the issues that are going on in our nation. If you found any of this to be informative, if you've liked any part, please do like it, do share. If you're finding the show afterwards, please do leave your comments if you're not with us live. We still pay attention to every comment from everybody, and we do respond as much as we can. And most of all, please do subscribe, because that's the only way we see that the throttling that happened in the show, you may have experienced it live. The only way to fight that is the algorithms. Getting more people to subscribe lets it get out to more people, and it makes it harder for them to try and shadow ban, to try and throttle and slow down and try and stop you from expressing your free speech. But we thank you for the time you've been here with us. Dal, thank you. I'm glad to see that you showed up. I hope you were watching the entire show. Look forward to your comments afterwards in the comment section. Links for everything will be in the comment section so you can see it in full for yourself and get your own context. And otherwise, folks, I want to thank you. Thank you for being part of this show. Thank you for being out there and part of this audience. I love you all. I hope you will all be well, and I'll talk to you again next week